Log on to kcbzradio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at kcbzradio.com.
Situation and circumstance. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance? Situations and circumstances. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. How can we see each other with only a glance?
Cake mixing, race mixes, matrix, kill the witches, 3 digits, made of 6s.
Oh yeah.
Fight for wisdom.
Once again, welcome to kcbzradio.com. And welcome to Situation and Circumstances. And I'll be your host. My name is Mr. Classiq. And, of course, I'm here with TBT, the best team.
Yeah.
What's happening? Go ahead and tell the people hello.
Hey, y'all. It's Mariah Leybah here.
What up?
That's Julius.
Yeah. You know, Julius, I had nothing to say slick. But I do have something to say. Once again, I am Anthony, Mr. Classiq Jackson. And last time we talked about on the show, we talked about, well, this is part of a four-part episode or celebration. Race obligation is the name of these 4 parts. And the first time we talked about, last week before last, right? Mm-hmm. We talked about marrying outside of your race, and we had a lot to say on that. Mm-hmm. And we didn't all agree, which is one of the wonderful things. And I want to say something about that really quickly. I actually received a text message I received a lot of text messages after that show and messages on a lot of other devices from some of our listeners. And one of the questions from some of the listeners that apparently know a little bit about my background, they asked me, well, would I want my children, the individuals that are multiracial, would I want them to marry someone that wasn't black? And then someone else asked me, am I like that other guy? They were talking about you, Julius. Am I like that other guy where I feel like, I wish I never would have had children by someone that was other than African American? They asked me that question, and they were like, and then they got to slurring your name and all kind of stuff, man. And here's what I told them. And first of all, I want my children to marry people that respect and love and honor them, as well as give them growth-oriented opportunities, and vice versa, whoever that might be. But what I want to say to the listeners is that our show, we're not always going to agree, and if we did, you probably would stop listening. The point of our disagreements, though, are not to just disagree for the sake of being loud and obnoxious. We're trying to show individuals that based on certain circumstances and situations, you can still have a meaningful and impactful conversation. We're trying to get people to talk about these things and trying to figure out ways of making that conversation a safe place. Yeah. And so whether or not I agreed 100% with what my friend and teammate Julius said, or whether he agreed with me during that whole time, one thing's for sure, we agree with each other's ability to be able to share and express these things in a healthy and meaningful way. And so we are going to get into a lot of fun today, talking about the part 2 of this race obligation, which is multiracial children. And we have a couple of people here, so we're going to get into that here at kcbzradio.com. And
for all those callers out there, we'll get to you in a moment, okay? We'll be right with you.
What do you mean callers? Callers?
Yes.
Y'all didn't know, right? We will also, for the first time, not only is this the first live show, I know you guys thought it was live all those times, but this is the first live show, and we will actually have people calling in. So when we come back, we will be talking a little bit about, we'll meet a couple of our guests. We'll dive right into what it's like, the good, the bad, and the ugly of being multiracial or biracial. We'll talk about how that looks in hip-hop, amongst other things. And so, yeah, so hang on, listeners. We'll be right back to you. you on kcbzradio.com.
Log on to kcbzradio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at kcbzradio.com.
Yeah, so welcome back to Situation and Circumstance. We are talking about multiracial children and or biracial children, and actually more specifically, we have some guests, and we want to talk about what it was like growing up under the guise of biracialism or multiracialism. And so first I want to introduce everybody to our first guest. His name is, say that for me.
Marquitri. Yes, Marquitri Cyrus.
All right, and welcome. He said it's okay if we call him Mark because I don't want to slay his name. Yep. It's a beautiful name. I don't want to slay it through the conversation.
It's all good.
And so I know that you're a full-time college student studying
kinesiology.
Kinesiology. What is kinesiology?
It's a study of the motion of the human body.
Okay. Yeah. I like some parts about that already. The motion of the human body. I think I might know a little kinesiology. Okay, yeah. And then so look, I can't even say it.
Kinesiology.
Right, so kinesiology. Yes. So I'm having a hard time saying kinesiology and marquetry.
Marquetry, you got it.
And so I got it right. And so what is actually? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then inside of that, tell us what your racial makeup is.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Vallejo, California, and moved to Fairfield, and I moved out here. And my ultimate goal in life is to, just create generational wealth for people and to help others out and help people become healthy, increase their circulation, raise their vibration, and, I'm a people person, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just really just like, about the people, trying to, just like, how people just, build confidence, become the greatest versions, and, go after what they really want and believe in, whether that be whatever it is, just pursue it.
Do you think that I love that everything you said, especially like wanting to create things that help get people to this higher vibration. I'm so with that, and that's part of our mission here, one of the many, but certainly inclusive to our mission here as well. And how do you think? Let's start here. How was it being? Because everyone can't see you right now,
yes.
And so when I'm looking at you, you actually remind me a lot of my son.
Yeah. In
that I'm sure you get like the different questions. Are you Samoan?
Yeah.
Are you
all
Puerto
the time?
Rican?
All the time. A majority of the time is usually people think I'm Polynesian or like an islander. And or black and Asian, but my gender is black, Mexican, Native American. For the most part, I got to do a DNA test, but that's what I am though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My dad's he's black. My mom's Mexican. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so we're going to ask a little bit more about that. Before we do, I want to introduce our another guest of ours. His name is Jeremy Capdevielle. Did I say the Capdevielle part right?
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you smile like, I can't believe you said it right.
You just said it
right. You've been clucking up the other stuff, and then you said that right. And so I'm here also with Jeremy, and he's a self-identified first-generation biracial Mexican American. He teaches programs focused on identity and power. It says the pillars of my passion and purpose are intercultural grief and celebration, ancestral connection, and nature appreciation. Magic is part of my cultural upbringing, and it is infused in everything I do. Let's welcome Jeremy to the show.
Hello.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, and so I think I already told everyone what your racial makeup was, but go ahead and expound on that for us.
So when people ask me, or when I think about how I identify, I say Mexican American, and still I feel like it's this ongoing exploration where I'm like, I'm also French, but you hear my last name is Capdevielle, and my father immigrated from Mexico when he was to LA when he was about 20. And so I I identify as first generation Mexican American. At the same time, I'm like, well, it doesn't feel completely right because my mom's been here for multiple generations on, ancestry from Ireland, and actually one of our deep and distant ancestors was the first person that was born that came on the Mayflower. And so there's, all these multitudes of intersecting identities. And I think day in and day out, there's always this question of, wait, who am I and who do I get to make myself to be?
I like that. Who am I and who do I get to make myself to be? Mm-hmm. Which is so interesting because I think that, when I look at you, I want to ask my TBT team a question. And I know that you both may have spoke to Jeremy a little bit when he first came in earlier today. But when you look at him, and I know that we try to look through a lens of, multiculturalism and this and that, but, or let's just pose this to everyone in the room. How many of you assume or would assume that he would be white just from looking at him? Is there anybody who would just kind of, you'd assume that, right? Yeah. And part of me feels like when your racial makeup is anything else and you have the addition of African American added to that, you don't get that luxury of getting to just choose which you're gonna be. But I'm not biracial, so I don't know if that's the case. I want to pose that to you, Mark. When you do you get that luxury? Do you find yourself having to choose which one you're going to be, or what's life like? Actually, what's life like as a kid? What was life like?
Oh, like both sides, like the heritage, like my mom and then my dad, like the soul food versus the Hispanic food, like that.
It's as simple as that.
I mean, I noticed like growing up, it was it was a lot of trying to be boxed in one way or the other, but I always stood outside the box and observed and seen that I'm myself, I shouldn't be placed into a certain category or something like that when I'm mixed and I'm embracing both sides of my culture. You want me to keep going?
Oh. You know what I'm saying? Is that enough?
You know what I'm saying? Drop the mic. Okay, so for an example, growing up in elementary school, the Mexicans, they would just view me as, oh, you're black, and they wouldn't usually associate themselves with me, or vice versa. The blacks would look at me as like an outsider or something. When I'm just me, but just the brainwashing and the perception of people is it's like one-sided for the most part. Growing up, I mean, we're all young, so that it was taught by somebody. That's why they were moving a certain way, and and especially in middle school, it was like fights, blacks versus Mexicans, and both of my friends on either side, they would just be conflicting, But I would stay out of it, try to tell them that, we can all get along. It shouldn't be one versus the other, Yep.
You're never this enough, you're never that enough. So let's just try to bring it together.
And then things started, when I got to high school, things started to because I got wiser and, things started to narrow down, but it was still the same. It was still overall the same conflict. It was like, are you with them or are you with us? Stuff like that. It's always trying to you should be this way or that way, or instead of just just being yourself and just living your truth.
How did that feel?
Can you
remember how that felt?
Yeah. I mean, at times I did feel pressured. Just trying to fit in. Sometimes around certain crowds. You know what I'm saying? That way they wouldn't be all oh, you know what I mean? Oh, you're different, or I always was different, but I did feel the pressure from my surroundings, trying to pressure me to be a certain way, but I never surrendered to that pressure.
I feel like that's what's an amazing thing about being mixed, even though it's really tough as a kid. Any mixed person, including myself that I know, will always say that it's tough. Just like the video we just heard, is everyone's trying to put you in a box to check a box. But the beautiful thing of being on the other side of that is that you see each individual as an individual, because you've had to learn that you are that. And so accepting that you are enough just as you are. Now let's learn about you and all the different intricacies versus just seeing and that is that, period. No, there's so many more layers to that.
Yeah. And then, like, you know, as I got older, you know, people, like, I'll be walking down the street or something, people be like, hey, oos. And I'm like, you know, like how they refer to, like, Polynesians. I'm like, I got no oos in me. You know what I'm saying? Like, but it's like, oh, for real? Like, no, you're lying. You're lying. You know, it's just like, you know, just stuff like that, you know, it's funny. But, you know, it is what it is, though, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, people all like, try to just have, like, a predetermined, like, category when they're speaking to someone.
They want to quickly put you into that category. Otherwise, they don't know what to do with you.
Yeah, true.
So do I cast you aside?
You know, like, but like, you know, like as you get older, like you start seeing things, you know, like, you know, from a more wise perception. Excuse me. And like I noticed that though, you know what I mean? Like, but like I said, I just keep on. I just want to like just help people out and stuff. Some people, you know, you know, you just can't help them. You know, but others are, you know, like they're just confused and they were taught, you know, wrongly from, you know, others, like, you know, you got to be this way or that way, but, you know, but you can always live your truth. You can always turn your life around and, you know, be who you want to be, you know what I'm saying, deep down, instead of, you know, what, you know, people surrounding you, even family members, you know, what they were telling you growing up. You know what I'm saying? If you don't feel comfortable doing things a certain way, then you don't have to do them a certain way.
Yeah, even if you don't see immediate change in them, though, just speaking your truth plants a seed.
Yeah,
and you don't know where that seed's going to grow.
Yeah, and it grows into like a huge, you know, palm tree, you know, like oak tree, or, you know what I'm saying? Like,
depending on what part of the country you live in. You know, they got oaks or palms.
Spiritually, though, you know what I'm saying?
Well, so we actually have our very own beautiful tapestry of cultures here, that being Mariah. How was it for you in the same situation? How was it for you growing up as a kid and having? It sounds like you are more so biracial, believing being two different ones, I'm like multiracial. It's like okay, you got to be. So how was that for you?
I mean, I didn't fit into none of the categories. Like I've said in previous shows, I had to click that other box because I can't just choose one of them. I'm not going to do that. And no matter how many times you tell me you must choose one, you're trying to tell me to X out all the rest of my family? That's not okay. So not only was I multicultural, now I'm also now a woman. So now I'm a, ooh, girl, you're exotic. No, I'm from the Bay. I'm not, I don't know.
You mean you can't be exotic and from the Bay?
Exotic, but here's the thing that's been perpetuated is exotic is from this land afar, from the jungle. It's like you're this thing that just came out of the earth. I don't even know what you are.
Sky. Yeah, like.
And no, that's just because that they saw something that looked nothing like them, and so I look nothing like anybody growing up, and so they're like, oh my gosh, you're exotic, you're one of those things. So now I become an object to be obtained. And so my whole life, that's how I felt like I was always objectified, not just because I'm a woman, but also I'm a woman and I'm multicultural. So I have this added layer. And so I had a lot of trouble with that since I was a kid. I remember I would cry if I got too dark because the world told me if you're too dark, that's not good enough. You're not able to go. You're not able to be a leading lady in the film industry because you have to be really white and you have to look a certain way. Well, I'm getting darker and darker by the minute. Well, so of course
melanin.
Oh my goodness! So I had an identity crisis, honestly, growing up until I really looked into who God created me to be, and I said, yo, thank you for making me this way. I'm super appreciative. I got lumpy on this side, got tamales on this side, got this color on this side,
good, you know,
that hair on that side.
Go back with
all
the
these
food
different
reference.
cultures.
I love that.
But it's more than that, though, too. It's all the different beautiful intricacies that come from, like, my Creole family and my Mexican family and all their ways of thinking, their ways of talking. And I'm just like, wow, I get to see all the beauty of the world, a lot of that within my own family. So I get to know what people, they don't know what they don't know. So I get to see that, and why do they know that? Why do they think that way? So I got to be bred with that, and then be able to look at it and say, "Yo, I don't believe in that." So I'm going to step out, no matter how hard it is, and then go back in and infiltrate and just plant seeds the way that I know that I can.
Right. And Jeremy, How about you? Just little Jeremy as a kid, having the benefit of being biracial. Sounds like there may be a little multiracial in yours as well. I think I heard French, and I know I heard certainly Spanish, and what was the other?
Irish.
And so I'm really curious if there is any contrast to how or what they went through, only because of the fact that in their cases they both have an obvious color tone to their skin that a person, even though they're still going to assume what they think they are, they're going to certainly add they're going to figure a couple of things in there, or there's only going to be a certain amount of things they might figure. Is there any contrast to that with you being with you looking to with some of us thinking that you look like you're Caucasian, but you're not? How does that feel when someone thinks you're that and you're not? And when did you realize that there was even this interest in figuring out which, or choosing or not choosing, or the lack or whatever? How was it?
Well, I have my experience contrast from yours, because no one ever tried to put me in a box. Because you look at me and you're like, that's the box you go in. You're this blonde white guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I identify as Mexican American now, and it wasn't until actually a few years ago that I was like, I'm Mexican. And I'm 32 now, and it wasn't until talking to more people about what it is to have a Mexican father, and around the emotionality, around the responsibility, like what how father roles show up in a family. And I'm like, damn, that's a very unique thing here happening.
Machismo.
And so the French and Irish pieces, those are just things that are part of my ancestral heritage, but I don't really claim them as my cultural identity because I didn't grow up with those influences. They don't feel as present to me. But once I recognized that I'm Mexican, really looked at that, and I had friends looking at me and talking to me for years, and they would be like, you don't call yourself Mexican? Or they'd be like, or I'd fragment my identity and be like, I'm half Mexican, or my dad's Mexican. And I would get people looking at me kind of like cockeyed, they're like they knew something that I didn't.
Yeah.
And once I recognized and started exploring the ways that I'm Mexican and how my life has been shaped by it, I was just like, I thought back to the first 5 years of my life when I grew up in LA, and it was a really multicultural environment. And then I moved to Orange County and went to this school that was basically Mexican and white. And when I was in kindergarten, I would spend recess playing with the Mexican kids, and our way of playing was a bunch of the guys out there wrestling each other, fighting, and it was we would fight, but there was so much respect and love, and it's a different way that that I've seen people in white communities I've been a part of fight. There's it's wow, we would have contact, but there was so much love in there, and there were some of my deepest friendships.
Yeah.
And
hold that thought. We're gonna get into. We're gonna come back and we're gonna keep talking about biracial children. Sounds like with what you're saying, Jeremy, there was a lot of soldiers of love. I appreciate that. Let's get into the Sade mix here at KCBZRadio.com. And callers, stay on the line. We'll be checking in with you real soon. Callers, stay on the line.
Log on to KCBZRadio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at KCBZRadio.com.
I so love that. That of course that was Obama, and it was in about 1995, and so it was a lot much sooner than we knew that he would become president, and he was being basically discussing. A lot of people wanted to know, if he was president, would he fight for a multiracial box to be checked, as opposed to having to kind of like what you were saying, Mariah, fitting into this one box. And so I'm interested in knowing what you all feel about what he just said in terms of specifically, you know, do you agree with what he said in terms of like that's just doing too, in so many words, it's like that's doing too much to when there's so many things that black people already got to fight for some stuff, let alone if someone's black and there are these other things. There's so many other things. So what do you think about what he just said? And that's posed to any of you.
Yeah, I feel like he brought what he said at the very end with the cab and how he was dressed and how people look at you just off how you're dressed. Like if you have a hoodie on, a beanie versus if you have a suit on, you know, you're gonna be looked at differently. You know, the cab's gonna pull over usually if you have a suit on first, and then, you know, if a guy has a hoodie on and you can't really see his face or, you know, or if his hair is, you know, like, you know what I mean, how they look at you differently. Like that right there is probably like the deepest part I heard of like this, everything that he was saying. Because like I can relate to that, you know, especially in Hayward, when I'm dressed a certain way, you know, I have like a hoodie on and a backpack, and then, you know, my fro, and then I have a hat, like a snapback hat on, and then the officers automatically assumed when I'm in 7-Eleven that I'm shoplifting and I'm not, I'm buying food. You know,
I got another question for you guys, but I want to introduce really quickly. I want to introduce Omar. Also goes by Oso Clean.
How you doing? Yep, So Clean.
So Clean. That's your hip hop tag.
Yeah, that's the music tag in general.
Okay.
It's in engineering, working on it all.
Gotcha. And so tell us a little bit about your racial makeup, because of course you actually. So just really quickly to the listeners out there. Once again, we are going to be accepting phone calls really soon here, and so we appreciate anyone who's holding on or deciding to call back for that. But Omar, when you first came in with Mark, I know you were here like as a supportive friend at that particular time. None of us had any idea that you also were multiracial. Right. And that's another one of those things. When I look at you, I just see black.
Right.
And I'm wondering how that feels to you and how that made things growing up for you.
Well,
and first of all, and what is your racial makeup? By the way?
Well, my father is, he was passed away, but he was Irish and Blackfoot, Native American, and black, but undisclosed. I'm not sure exactly where. And my mother is Creole and black, down from New Orleans.
Okay. And how was that? Like, it sounds like you only got to enjoy one part of that.
Well, I got to, I didn't have the opportunity to engage with the races that aren't as prominent when you look at me, because I always was put into a box and I didn't know anything other than the box that I was put into. So as I got older and I started talking to my aunts and, relatives that are in their 70s and 80s and still have their right mind, and learning more information, I gained an interest into other parts of my heritage that, have not been, shown to me or never were shown to me. So like with my mom, my grandmother spoke French, and, with the Creole, it's like dirty French, and we have our own way of food and everything, and that's just all I ever known, I don't know if that's even necessarily different than what you would call American black culture, because a lot of blacks in Louisiana and all over the United States are Creole, and have almost everyone in the United States is mixed in some way,
Well, and I think that thank you for welcome, by the way, and thank you for sharing that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have diversity within the diversity, right? So I wanted to have individuals that were mixed, and that mixture wasn't just black mixed with anything else,
right?
Because it feels like black mixed with anything else. Just we grow up in a country where that still equals black, and so many eyes,
right?
And
majority of that, majority.
And then that's why with you here, Jeremy, I'm appreciating it, because there's this other perspective that I don't believe gets discussed. And I like how you said you weren't put in a box because you people just assumed you were what you were. And I kind of feel like with both of you and Omar, obviously looking on two completely sides of the spectrum, it feels like the same thing probably happened, where they looked at you and assumed you were black, Omar, and so they didn't ask about anything that had to do with Native American or any of these other parts.
Right.
Hey, you look black, you're black. And then the same thing with you. I feel like, they felt like, you looked white, so you're just white, so you didn't have to deal with that. But how does that feel when you are put in this position where people aren't putting you in the box, but kind of they did, right? Because they put you in this one culture's box. It didn't happen to you the same way as it, say, would happen to Mariah, who's visually a person of color, right. As well as Mark, who's visually a person of color. And so what did you notice? How was that hurtful or enjoyable, or what are the pros and cons to that? I suspect that you enjoyed some white privilege.
I was like, wait, so what which question to answer now? I was like, I had something. I was like, okay, which way are we going to
go? Start wherever you want to. Just anywhere in that realm.
Honestly, in the last couple of years, being in the Bay Area, I really shied away from like white liberal communities, and what was coming to me when you were just talking was like, oh, it's funny. Like you were like someone was saying you had extremist views in some way. They're like, or Anthony's more extremist than you. I'm like, and I've been like feeling the last couple of years just like this growing sense that white liberals in the Bay Area are like the worst.
I agree.
And I'm like, and I'm in the Bay Area, and I've grown up in a lot of the culture where I've been indoctrinated by a lot of Bay Area white culture. I've been here for about 7 years, and so when I get like this, like I'll put quotes up, a white liberal coming at me, looking at me like, hey, you're one of me, like let's talk in this kind of way, and I'm just like, I'm like. Kind of sizing up. I'm like, all your friends are white. This is kind of like, and I'm putting people in a box, and there's truth to some of these things I'm thinking, and at the same time, I'm like, fuck, I need to exercise this muscle of knowing that there's more to everyone than meets the eye, And I do the same thing with, and I catch myself and I get caught all the time. But I do have the reaction, that's what came to my mind with like when white folks in the Bay Area come up to me like, hey, you're just like me. I'm like
that's very interesting. And also, as part of our 4-part race obligations, we will at some point talk about white privilege and white liberals and what that means to. We're going to dive way deep into that, and maybe we'll have you back because I know that you kind of are avid about addressing white liberals.
And I just want to say in the privilege piece, because if someone asks a question or we want to go into that, we can. But I love talking about that because it's something that as I've identified as white in the past, I was more like, I'm going to train white folks to be able to like use our power and privilege and voice to create more space for people. And so there is, I've grown into recognizing the dynamics of my skin color and how I look. And so I feel really passionate about talking about the power we hold in all of our different ways and the influence we have that comes with that.
I have a question for all of you. What do you do when you're somewhere? What do you do when you're somewhere and someone thinks that you're one race, and then they talk about one of your other makeups? So in other words, I had a Puerto Rican friend of mine, and he looked very much European American, right? And he's Puerto Rican though. So anybody who knows a little bit about that culture or that racial makeup, there's the extremely dark, and the word Rican is from African. So Puerto Rican, there's very light, very dark, fair skin, not so fair, kinky hair, straight hair, all those same things, kind of like African Americans and other cultures have. And I remember I was working with him in a professional setting, and we were just talking during lunch, and he was saying how he's been in conversations where people assumed that he was white. Mm-hmm. So they would be talking about other cultures, not knowing that he was part of that, and then and how uncomfortable that would be. Have you guys ever, and what's an example of that for you, or has that ever happened to you where because someone thought you were this, they're talking about this other thing, and maybe they're even closer than you think, maybe even in your family? Has anyone ever dogged the other part of your makeup?
Yeah, like you mean like just for an example, like Mexicans talking about blacks, or like
exactly.
Like Yeah, actually, I have, and even my friends, like if I catch any of my friends doing that, I shut it down real quick because I try to explain to them that's not right, And if it's a stranger, if I can say something, but obviously, everybody's entitled to their opinion, First Amendment. But I really don't agree with that topic of discussion. So what I'm saying, I usually try to shut it down or just veer the other way from it. If they're not, I can't get through to them. But yeah, it's like it's like I feel like it's taught, it's trained. For people to think and say certain things.
Yeah.
No, I hear you. And thank you for sharing that. Really quickly, we're here at kcbzradio.com, chambersradio.com, kcbzglobal.com, and of course, you're listening to Situation and Circumstance. In about 30 minutes or less, we'll be accepting our first live on-air phone call. So stay tuned for that. And so we're going to continue talking about this thing we call multiracial. What multiracialism is, and certainly biracial, and how that impacts. I'm really interested in how. I'm interested in parts of how it felt as a kid, because when I think about, two of my sons are African American, and then two of my sons are Hispanic or Latino, and forgive me anyone who's Hispanic or Latino if I'm not using the correct way to express you culturally, but that to say, they're basically Mexican, Spanish, and Black, two of my youngest kids, and they're adults now. And I remember when my middle son, when he went up to the park, and there was a bum laying out there, a white bum, and I mean that in so many ways. And he saw my son, and he said, he basically called him a nigger. And then he told him, my son was he was about 7 years old, I believe, maybe somewhere between 6 and 8. And he was there with one of his friends. She was about the same age, and she was a little African-American girl, a little chocolate. And when they got there, he called my son a nigger, and then he told him to take your nigger bitch with you.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And so it was bigger than just the insult. What he actually single-handedly did is he made me have to start talking to my son about these things sooner than what I had planned on talking to him. Mm-hmm. And it dawns on me that oftentimes the kids take the characteristics of the father in a lot of these situations. It sounds like even while we're in here, that the identity that everybody has maybe leaned a little bit closer to is that one, or at least should say I feel like the father has influenced what that looks like. And certainly intentionally for me, it let me know that even though my son was mixed, and I taught him a lot of his heritage from a Latin perspective as well as from African American, I had to pretty much raise him as an African American child, because for the same reason that Obama said, it doesn't matter if I'm dressed in this full suit when I go out and hail a cab, they just see nigga. Mm-hmm. They don't see, if he held up a sign that say, no, but I'm biracial, I'm part this. Yep. Can't the cab just pick up my white part? Mm-hmm. Right? And so I'm wondering for you guys, how does that look for you?
Well, when I was a kid, I was learning about all my different backgrounds. And so the ones that I grew up with, practicing as far as having Spanish being spoken around me, and Mexican food on my Mexican side. So that's my dad's mom. And then on my mom's side, it's Filipino. That I knew a lot more of, so that's I had some people speak Tagalog, but that stopped because we never learned Tagalog. So that's the Filipino side. I'm also Native American and a bunch of European, so very mixed. And what I grew up with is people imposing whatever they thought I was or my family was, and I've moved 24 times in my life, and different kind of communities, all different kinds, from living in a hotel in our trailer to living in the best community in the town. And so I remember this one time, my dad we lived at the top of the hill, and he was out there gardening, doing what he does. And someone came up to him, and they were like, "Hey, can I speak with the owner of the house, please?" And he was like, "Excuse me?" He had his hat on. He was all dirty, hands all dirty. And they're like, "No, I want to speak with the owner of the house, please, not with you." And he always makes a joke out of everything, and that's just who he is. And he said, "Hold on, I'll get him really quick." Takes off his hat and says, "Hi, nice to meet you." Puts out his hand to shake their hand. And of course that shut them up real quick. And so it's these ideals that people have about what we're supposed to look like, and what we're supposed to be doing. And that's one of those things. And that's the same with me. Are you black? Well, you look black, so you are black. I don't care what you say. That's what you are. Thank you. We'll get right back into this conversation. We are going to go to a clip real quick and be right back with you. Thanks for listening.
We're going to go into our first callers after that, too. So, yeah.
Log on to kcbzradio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at kcbzradio.com.
Yeah, those, of course, were three very different artists, all sharing in common that they are biracial. And their makeup is a lot like what we have in the room right now, considering we look at Drake, and I believe, and I think in all three cases, the father is black. I think in Drake's case, I think the other culture, and I could be mistaken, but I believe the other makeup is white. And then I believe in J. Cole's situation, I believe it's the same. I believe it might be the same in all three. Even G-Eazy was that last artist that got on there. But one of the things I noticed that G-Eazy does that Drake and J. Cole do not is he is like, if you go online and you type in G-Eazy and then you type in race or racial or biracial, any of that, he has so many things that you can click on where he's just describing his black part as if he's on this crusade to make sure that people know that he's black. And he's actually the one that looks, and you may be able to identify with that part. He's the one that, well, he looks white when you see him. Yeah. But one of his parents full black and the other one is full white. And so when I was researching and I was listening to that, I started thinking about everybody who most people that I've met that are under this category of multiracial or biracial. They seem to always claim or prefer claiming whichever one of those races gets them further away from white. Just something I noticed. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that.
That was Logic, by the way.
Who did I say?
G-Eazy.
I mean, yeah, Logic. I meant to say Logic, not G-Eazy. If you look up Logic. Thank you, Julius. Julius, you still here?
I'm where I need to be, brother.
Julius might be like, if people wasn't race mixing, we might not have to worry about all of this.
If only we could see his thought bubbles. Yeah, that's exactly.
But here's where I want you to say it if that's what you're thinking, as opposed to me putting it in your mouth, because the reality is, once again, we're here to have the situation that you've described, and I just want to mention this, the situation that, and by you I mean Julius, the situation that you described when we were having this talk last time, and your perspective on black men staying within their race and vice versa, black women staying with black men and vice versa. For me, the reason why it wasn't an offensive position was because there is a level of race preservation that has to be done when you look at the fact that when you look at the fact that we're in a system that is more geared towards the destruction of people of color, more specifically black people. And so when you have so much against a particular culture, I'm not saying that that's the perspective that you have, but just for mine, there's a lot to say about that, the need for that, because half of our men are incarcerated, so half of them are political prisoners that shouldn't even be in there or shouldn't have been in there. Some of them are in there for doing the same. Like, we can go on. We all know I don't have to laundry list them. We all know the varying things, or we will know. We're gonna learn today the varying things of how our people are held back. So I find no offense. On the other hand, it is interesting to sit in a room where there's someone or someone's potentially who believe that not necessarily that every culture or race should stick with theirs, but there is there's specific reasoning behind why it's important for black to be with black. And then we're in here with people who are versions or the offspring of exactly something that some of us don't agree with. So I am interested in knowing how you feel to be in a room with these beautiful makeups of multiculturalism.
Man, I mean, it's cool, but I'm not for it.
Hold your tongue in the room full.
I'm not for that. I'm not for like assimilating. Like we can be cool together. You can show me your culture, and I can show you mine. But like as far as mixing cultures, that's not what I'm for. I'm not a multiculturalist. I believe each of our cultures are unique, and they should be described and loved. But I don't believe that they should be shared. Don't give me your culture. I'm not gonna give you mine. Like you can show me what you're about, and I'ma love it. But if I don't, that's my prerogative, and you don't have to love mine. But as far as like setting up shop, like my home is wherever I want to be home. It has nothing to do, with location. It has nothing to do with like proximity to anything. That like if I go to like Ethiopia right now, I can set up shop. That's my home. That's my house. But also if I come back and go to Louisiana, that's my home. That's my house. So as far as like Brothers did Ancestry.com, and I respect it, but that's not something that I would do just because it's like that. To me, it doesn't solve anything for me, because I can set up shop in Ghana and I'd be like, you know what, this is my home. These brothers see me as brothers, these sisters sees me as brother, and I see them the same. So I don't necessarily have to like find that
they
lineage.
Don't see you as that.
That's also their prerogative. That's sharing their culture, me, sharing theirs. So that's definitely a right. But I see every brother as African. So I'm not for the division as far as like, hey, he Jamaican, he Dominican, he's Black American, he's from Paris, he's Australian. I'm not for none of that. I'm for the African descendants. That's it. So, and I think if those who identify in that same way, if we could like stop saying, now I'm not suggesting that we literally something, but I'm saying if we see each other as a brother and sister, I think that's paramount.
All right. Well, I knew you was in the building. We're going to take our first call now. Welcome, caller. Who am I talking to and where are you from?
This is Oneida. I'm calling from Oakland.
Hi.
Hello, Oneida. How are you, Oneida?
I'm good. I think the internet radio is like a little bit behind in how we hearing you. But anyway, congratulations on the radio show, bro.
Turn her radio. Hey, do you think you could turn your radio down a little bit for us?
Okay, how about now?
That's better.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So once again, congratulations. The Classiq, this is a big deal. I've been knowing them for a little while. And the subject matter is real simple sometimes. If we just look in the mirror sometimes and we know how people gonna view you, what kind of society we live in. And we need to start just keeping it real with mixed people, both one race people, white people, whatever people. And we always trying to sugarcoat stuff so that people's feelings don't get hurt. But if we live in reality and quit trying to create something that ain't there, then people probably have an easier time getting along in the world.
And when you say trying to create something, what's there? Can you be a little bit more specific? Like, what do you mean when you say if we stop trying to create something that's there? Or excuse me, that's not there. I'm sorry.
you're half black and you half white. That's just what you are. There's no really choosing sides. That's just like, you know, if my mama is black and my daddy is black, great grandmother might be white. What? I'm gonna choose to be the white that's in my bloodline. You have to be what you are. And how did it get there? But you gotta be what you are. And if you are both, then you need to know about both. You need to know the relationship of both. Both races of people are even in this country. It's deeper historically, and it has a lot to do with how we behave. And, you know, there's also a shade supremacy, where the lighter your skin is as a black person, there's certain behaviors that go with that. So people need to just be more simple and just realize where we live at, what we look at, where we look like. You know, it's real simple. And I'm not worried about like feelings getting hurt or none of that. It's just that every day you just create something else unnecessary to worry about. Who am I? Where do I belong? Why people treat me like this? It's bigger issues.
Well, thank you so much, Oneida, not only for calling in and giving, dropping some knowledge off right there, but you were caller number one. You have won nothing other than the fact that you get to know that you were caller number one. And I certainly appreciate you and hope to see you soon doing your Afrobean thing. She is a professional dancer, among other things, and a philanthropist and some more things. So thank you for calling. Do we have another caller on the line? Let's say caller number 2. Actually, before we do that, one of the things that I love that she said, so she said, just be you, right? I love that she said that, but not for the reason that maybe she or others would think. The reason why I love that she said that is like, okay, well, I feel like that's the end result of what everybody says. Like you're biracial, multiracial, just be you. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it doesn't seem like you always get to do that, because if you're a culture that's mixed with a darker skin culture, then we go back to that whole Obama holding the sign thing. You're going to get profiled, and they're not going to worry about that. All you need is enough of I think you need more than, I know that the saying is that you need the one drop of black blood and you're black. I think it's more than one drop, because if that win, it's the potency of the drop. Yep. So Logic very well can go somewhere and not get stopped by the police because he looks like there's no black in him. And that has to be an enjoyable moment of being able to just walk in. Whereas you, Mark, you clearly look, whether they think you were Samoan, that's still a version of what the police will feel like. That's black enough.
Yeah.
Get him, beat him to death. Mariah, with you having all the makeup, let's say that I assume that you looked Filipino. Well, if you did look just Filipino and you're darker and I'm a police, I'm not going to be worried about if you look Filipino or not. I just see your melanin being a little darker to a dark enough for me to say you're worth profiling. So I feel like society and the powers that be force us to have to acknowledge something or another.
A white man in my car told me, remember this, he's a white man. He's a little bit older than me. He asked me, but then told me, what are you? And number one, do not ask me what am I. I'm a human being, firstly. What are you? Oh, wait, no, right. No, you know what? No, you're black.
True.
You're black. I go, but I'm actually not black. And so I proceeded to tell him all of my makeup. And he said, okay, so you're black. I said, are you not listening to me? And I proceeded to say it again. He goes, okay, but you know what? You look black to me, so that's what you are to me. You're black. And so it's realizing, you know what? It's much further than that. People aren't seeing people as people. People aren't seeing humans as humans. They're seeing them as an object of power, or to assert their power that they think that they have, but you don't. An object to manipulate, an object of trade. We're people, and so that's what I'm realizing. It's much further than it's horrific, honestly, of what's happening. But people want to just label you whatever that they want. So I do have to do a lot of work as a child to realize, I am a human. I am more than enough. I'm not just these labels that everybody else around me, people that I meet 1 second in a Macy's, is like, hey, what are you? So yeah, it was constant work as far as figuring out that who I am and what does that mean, who am I? Because it's not just plain as day, because everyone puts it in your face that it's not plain as day. You need to figure out who you are because I needed to know who you are. But it's not up to you. It's up to me.
I hear you.
That's deep.
I hear you. Julius. What's up? Someone just hit on my messenger and they said that their opinion was that in so many words, here we go again with someone who's saying you should stick with your own culture and that's what's holding us back. I invite, if that caller is still listening, I invite you to call.
Call.
And the number that you'd call is, Mariah, what's that number?
That number is 502.
Log on to kcbzradio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at kcbzradio.com.
And again, you're here at kcbzradio.com. And we're talking about race obligations. This particular episode, we're talking about biracial and or multicultural children. And we have some of those children who are now adults in the room. But we were asking Julius, what do you say to someone who feels like, here we go again with figuring out ways to be separate and not equal? Because I didn't hear you say that you wanted people to be separate and unequal, so I didn't hear you say that. But what do you say to those who are? How do you respond? How do you respond?
I don't even address it. That's not somebody who's like for the cause. That's not somebody who's about to do something for me or my people. So if you think that me marrying and producing black kids is doing harm to the black community, that's not somebody who I'm really too interested in. That's going backwards. That's going backwards to a place that didn't work. It's like some people define insanity by doing the same thing over and over and over and it not working but continue doing it over, expecting different results. That's expecting different results. Assimilating did not work. Segregation or desegregation did not work. The black community was stronger when it had its own communities. The black community was stronger when it had black-owned theaters and banks and hospitals and libraries. It was stronger when the black family was together.
Let me ask you a question. Oh, go ahead.
Nah, that's just like, that's mad. That upsets me because I don't know who this person is, but that's the opposite. I'm trying to build, and that's the opposite of building.
If there was right now, and this is the hugest if you've ever heard, if none of the stuff, and I asked you a question similar to this at another point, but if none of the things happened that happened in there, and we had a strong foothold on all these things that we created, like you said, we had our own everything. We had just like you have areas of a city where there's majority Chinese and their dollar gets to circle around in their communities, and all of the other cultures for the most part have these areas where they get to enjoy that, and we don't.
Right.
And so if we had that and we were, and the system, and again I know these are incredible ifs, but I want to get to a point here. If the systems and everything were not so set up against us, and everything was kind of on the even playing field, and all these beautiful things that way, then even though it sounds like you would still particularly want to stay within your culture, would you then still believe that there was something wrong with, and again, wrong meaning maybe your choice of words wouldn't be wrong, but something, would there be an indifference at that point if it wasn't for if we were in I'm giving you a different situation or a different circumstance to look at it through?
That's hard for me to answer, but because our history here in America, it started with just like a stripping of language, raping our women, raping our men. So that's kind of hard to even think what if none of that happened. I just really can't fathom erasing. Like, it's actually the 400 years, 1619, it's 400 years this year that the first slave ships or recorded slave ships was here. So to erase 400 years, and man, just imagine like this utopia for black people. We weren't brought here to be humans. That's not what black people were brought here to be. So I can't think, what if 400 years ago we were brought here to think that? I just can't. I do know in Oakland they got little Koreatown, they got Chinatown, they got Japantown. I do know they got little Kabul and Fremont. I do know in Fruitvale that's predominantly Latino. I do know that. And they can like set up shop as foreigners, don't speak a lick of the native tongue here, and set up shop, have their own hospitals, have their own insurance companies, have all that. But when black people say we need anything remotely close, it got to be for the benefit of everybody. You know, like the civil rights movement, affirmative action. It was dubbed that, but look who it benefited, not us. So when we start preaching that black power stuff, it's like, oh, you too harsh. Nah, other people preaching that, y'all let it go. You know, like you got the Jewish people, they got like billions of dollars. You know, you got like everybody, but when we start talking about reparations, it's like, what? That's so long ago. That's right now. I mean, look at the prison industrial complex. That's right now. That's slavery. Yeah. But if we start talking about that, it's like, I'm too harsh or I'm going backwards. Nah, I'm talking about a better time. She's talking about, whomever this person was is talking about a time of hope.
What made you think it was a she? I'm kidding.
Plead the fifth.
Well, let's. Looks like we have another caller. Oh boy, did I want to say something to that? Thank you, caller. Welcome to Situation and Circumstance here on KZBZ. Please tell me your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, I'm calling from San Francisco. I'm listening to your program. It's very interesting, and your viewpoints are great. I'm some of Mark's family. Although
is that you, Susie?
Yeah, it's me. It's me.
Hey, how you doing?
It's me, little boy. I'm good. I just have to say that, you know, his father is my roommate. We've been friends for decades. You know, so he's very close to my heart. Except when he comes to my house, I understand he's got to walk on his knees, man. I can't take this anymore. It's too tall. So, anyways, I just wanted to say I'm a history buff, and, you know, so I understand a lot about American history, but I just wanted to add that who have colonized and ruled around the world for centuries.
The connection's going out.
No, I'm just saying they kidnapped the Irish. They took over Ireland 1,000 years ago. So they went to Ireland and they emptied the jails, they emptied the bars, they kidnapped kids off the street, they put them on ships, they brought them here to work the plantations. And they would call them indentured servants, but they were actually slaves. They hated the English. I mean, they hated the Irish. They still do. And about 100 years after they did that, that's when they went to Africa and, you know, kidnapped the black people, which I find all of it disgusting, and brought them here. And then everybody's on the plantation. So the master had forced people to procreate because he had more people to work the plantation and he had more people that he could sell and make more money. So my grandmother's Irish and she had 9 kids at home. My father, one of those 9 kids, and he's what they call black Irish. And he's got black skin because he's got African blood. And it may be from centuries ago, but he still has it. The other kids are aunts and uncles, and he's black.
Okay,
and,
I appreciate that you called in. Firstly, thank you. And what I will say is that, off top, the first thing that comes to mind is one of the things that's disappointing to me is when we can compare a lot of atrocities that have happened to human beings in general across the board. The difference between all those atrocities is that they're still being committed against people the darker you are. And so black people are still experiencing this, whether systematically, whether in the school district, whether through the media or television. There's so many things that are still being put into place to this day that are intentionally done to keep us. Wait, excuse me. Hold on. And so while I appreciate the information that you shared and while there is an abundance of truth in that, I don't think that it in itself is enough to say it's almost like whenever it almost goes to what Julius said when he says like when there's this thing that has to do with us, it's almost like someone else then comes up with a reason why, well, this happened to us too, and so let's look at that. Or this happened to these people too, and let's look at that. Well, a lot of things happen to a lot of people, but things are still happening to us now, today. They're still happening. So what and further, the reason why I asked, hold on, because I don't mind letting you have another chance at it. But the other part of this is when I think about the reason and I want to be intentional here, the reason why I asked Julius the question that I did was that I wanted to try to give a situation that could show what differences, if any, there are between, let's say, a white man saying we should only date within our own culture, and why he's saying it, feeling like there's two different, completely different reasons why it is important for this to happen. And so I wanted to try to contrast those two different scenarios. What's your racial makeup, if I may ask?
Well, I'm Caucasian, but I don't relate to people as to what I don't care what you are. I don't care what religion or what race you are. If you're good people, you're good people. I wasn't taught when I was a kid to hate everybody. And even if I was taught that, I wouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. I've done criminal justice. I know pretty much about incarceration, et cetera, et cetera. I worked out here at the criminal courthouse in San Francisco. So I understand all that. The only reason I say that about the Irish, it's just history that nobody knows, that very few people know. And that's all that, and I certainly empathize more with African American people, definitely. There's no doubt about that. The way that, and I understand that. I just think that, it's terrible that it's still the way that it is at this point in history. It just is. But, I live in the Bay Area in San Francisco. I mean, I get along with fine because I know that's all I'm saying.
Okay, well, thank you, Susie, for
their opinion.
Yes, no, and I appreciate your opinion. As a matter of fact, thank you for calling in and sharing your opinion with us. And I also want to appreciate and honor your multicultural view because it is necessary and it is and it sounds like it's a healthy one. And so thank you for calling KCBZradio.com, reaching out to Situation and Circumstance.
And I also want to thank her for sharing.
Are you going to do more shows like this?
Yes, every second and fourth Tuesday.
Thank you, Susie.
Every second and fourth Tuesday of the month. Thank you, Susie.
I start.
All right, Susie. Good job,
Have
Susie.
a good one. I want to also say thanks to sharing that information because I'm sure a lot of people don't know about that history, so that's also nice to know. But yeah, going back with what you were saying, Anthony, about there's a lot of things that happen to so many different communities and cultures, but let's look at the reality of what's happening still today. And I think that's the thing is like, let's be honest about what's happening today. Firstly, the reality is this, and how are we going to change this? And so for me, and that's piggybacking off of the last 2 weeks ago, what we had on air, which is, I believe it's a human thing, meaning people aren't seeing people, like I said already, people aren't seeing people as human, and they haven't for a very, very, very long time. It's just whatever they want to use people as, and they feel like they have this power that they can do that, and that is not true. And so it's like, it's going into that and infiltrating, what is the issue? Why do you feel like you are more powerful or that you have some sort of power over another community, whatever that community is? And here and now, it's the darker you are, the more black that you look, you are treated a certain way. And so like, let's deal with that reality. There's also, there's other realities with that too, that are also being done too, like Native American. I wish I knew more about my Native American heritage, but there are things that aren't allowed to Native Americans because the white folk, whoever's in charge, which is that, who don't feel like people are people, that feel like they have power over them, aren't allowing them to even be human and have fresh water. Let's just say that. You can't even have fresh water. You're not even a human enough to see that.
Excuse me.
Like, how long is this going to go on? So I think there's such a deep-rooted issue here that we need to attack. And it's not saying all the things that have happened over the hundreds of years, because hella things have happened over the years. Now what are we going to do about it?
And that's part of this show, right, is creating a conversation and trying to create a safe place for those conversations to happen. Hey, I want to thank my guests for being here today. And I want to give you the opportunity, let's say 1 minute or less, 30 seconds or less. What would you like to say that would be helpful for someone wanting to approach someone who is biracial? So maybe you don't want someone to say, what are you? What are you made of? So then what's something that you want people to know, being your last words about being biracial or multiracial? Let's start with you, Mark.
I would just talk to me just normally. You shouldn't just ask, what I am, and just be you. Just talk. Just like it shouldn't start going this way when it can just go that way. Go straight forward. Just be straightforward. You know what I'm saying? Like, it shouldn't be like, oh, that way you're asking me what I am. That way you can think in your head, oh, I'm going to talk to him this way now. You can just talk to me, just talk to me.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying?
It's all in the approach.
Yeah.
How about Omar? AKA, so clean.
Oh, so clean. Yeah. Yeah. Well, for me, I look at it like, it's not necessarily... to me, because I identify as black myself, it's not necessarily that I expect you to assume that I'm another race, but it should be on a broader spectrum for everybody. You shouldn't assume that anyone is a race, because everybody is, has their own history and their own culture. And like for me, like Jules said something about Ancestry.com earlier. For me, that was always interesting to me, because we don't know what we are here. We were stripped of our heritage and everything, as you said, and that's kind of what, sparked my interest in that. Does it change what I identify with? No, because that's what I always identified with. But
gotcha. And that sounds good. We're going to run out of time here. Jeremy, what's your last words on this?
So at first I was thinking that just being curious, but then I'm like, that can be a little confusing even to answer that question to someone. So I think just a simple question, since I don't get to talk about it often, is if you approach me, if you ask me, what do you love about being Mexican? I would love to answer that question.
And as always, we promise our listeners that we will continue to make beautiful mistakes. We embrace the opportunity afforded by our ancestors to speak, whether right or wrong, weak or strong. We be learning humans, working on liberation and scaffolding a meaningful and fair existence for all. Till the next time, my netches. Au revoir.
Situation and circumstance. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance? Situations and circumstances. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance?
Cake mix and race mixes, matrix, kill the witches, 3 digits, made of 6s, KKK or white privilege, old spirits, blood riches, real hatred, fake forgiveness, skinny image, fat problems, I don't really know how we solve them, gods made us, kings gave us, to enslave us, castaways on railways, underground dark web pages, Marvel heroes, connect the zeros, connect the pharaohs, bone marrow, Egyptian princes, dark and ancient, preserve the patience, black and Haitian, white and Asian, British coaches, eat crustaceans, ocean roaches, Illuminati, inject the bodies, GMOs, drug hobbies, Aboriginal, Pan-African, old biblical, reincarnation, hip-hop playlists, vocal rangers, sexist wages, sex changes, the game of life, bullets fly, ruin nights, players clueless, kids' rights, humans fight, nature loses, hard of hearing, dolomite, Darwinism, Garvanite, hates a virus, terabytes, hard to live with, parasites, come on!
Situation and circumstance. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance? Situations and circumstances. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. How can we see each other with only a glance? Look, some of us robotic, programmed to follow. Some of us have logic and we wide awoke.